Welcome to No Password Required, a monthly conversation that gives you an up-close and personal look at the world of cybersecurity.
Hello and welcome to No Password Required, a podcast dedicated to exploring the minds and personalities that make up the field of cybersecurity. I'm your host, Ernie Ferresso, and with me as always is Jack Clabby. We also have Pablo Torres coming up to have some fun with his segment Positively Cyber. But first, we need to discuss who we have on the show. On the podcast today, we're going to chat with Melinda Lemke, the head of information security at King Spalding law firm. For the first time in her professional career, she says she feels like a big fish in a little pond. We'll talk about fishing a little bit later on. In her spare time, Melinda travels and serves as a mentor for young professionals, whom she advises to never wait for an opportunity to create them. Well, speaking of talking to a world traveler, Jack, how are you, sir?
Ernie, I'm doing great. In fact, I've been thinking a lot about traveling lately because I'm not doing any of it. And I've been checking my various Hotel Point accounts. And going back and visiting my Hotel Point accounts, I realized that, they are really just username and password authentication. And I've been putting in, the various iterations of passwords that I've used over the years. And luckily, I have pretty good security. So I have not been reusing passwords, although the temptation was great. So I've been creating a lot of new passwords, thinking a lot about password management. And, passwords have been in the news a bit. There's been some sort of lighthearted takes on it as we all start, year-end planning and thinking about rolling into 2021 and updating our passwords in our personal lives. But there's been a fair amount of credential stuffing hacks in the news. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Many of our listeners are probably dealing with this to protect their own organizations, really. But, credential stuffing is, bad guys getting a hold of a list of compromised or otherwise visible username and password pairs, and then, pointing them and trying to attack them in a somewhat brute force manner. And it only really works because people reuse passwords among multiple sites. So, this is a conversation that I think, those who are in charge of security need to be having with their own password management for their employees, but also with their customers, right? If you have a website that faces the public, what are your password management policies? What are you doing to kind of look out for credential management in your personal life? Do you share your passwords with, people in your family, right? If something were to happen to you, would other people know how to get into your devices? How do you handle that?
Well, that's interesting. That brings up an excellent scenario, and I think it also which plays well, certainly with some of the demographic in Florida. Not to take it down to a real somber note, but a couple of years ago, my father passed away, and he had several different whether bank accounts, even social media accounts, and my mother just asked me the other day, how do I get access to your father's accounts when I don't have I may know his user, but I don't know his password and I can't change it. And so interesting thing to think about is how are you going to do that when you talk about managing passwords? And I mean, that goes into, do you share your passwords and what are the other, ups and downs?
I've been married for a while now. I'm not going to say how long because that could be a challenge, a knowledge-based authentication.
He's always
challenge
working.
To me.
Always working, that guy.
But it's part of now legacy planning, right? If you go to prepare a will, prepare a trust document, the lawyer that you're sitting with may ask you that question. Are you going to have a social media directive? And are you going to list your passwords somewhere and keep them safe in a safe or something like that? I share my passwords with a handful of people for personal social media for that purposes, but they don't know it right now, right? It's in a way that will go to them if something were to happen to me. And there are a couple of strategies for that, but keep in mind for end-of-life planning is absolutely having a legacy and devisement for that. Same thing true for kids, right? If you're in a house with a bunch of kids, what is the policy going to be? If you get them a phone, do they share the password with you? And a lot of parents I know struggle with that. But speaking of school, sort of kids, right? There's been a lot going on in schools these days too. And, I've done a lot of work over the years in terms of ransomware and breaches that have impacted schools. And so I live a lot with this. But the Huntsville, Alabama You read about this,
Yeah.
I think. So Huntsville, Alabama is obviously, it's Rocket City, USA, right?
Yeah.
So you have a sense that they have a heightened level of appreciation for things that are technological and science-oriented. And so there was a threat, a cyber threat against the system. And I think not a lot of detail has been released about what it was. But in a digital environment or even an in-person environment that's highly connected, if there is a risk to student data, they pulled the big red plug and shut it down. I've been involved in a number of data breaches and incidents short of data breaches in public schools, and I wish they had a plug like that to pull. So I think, so kudos, we don't know all the details, but kudos to Huntsville for doing it and for having the sort of communication abilities to shut it down, to warn people not to log in. It looks as if they were managing that well. They got some flack, but really they should be getting
the praises. Because, if you look at it, there's been a couple in recent school areas, school districts that are in the news. Here in Florida, it was earlier this year. Beautiful Miami-Dade County, everybody going online, and they nailed a kid. Decided he was going to, DDoS the school. So you had that, and then just recently in the news today, I guess it was, I think it was up in Maryland, school district ransomware. They ended up paying, and I think that and we talked about this last time, was, the paying of the ransomware and such and moving forward. But a lot of it, I think Huntsville is an example of being proactive ahead of the thing. The folks up in Baltimore, what do you do, right? Here they're getting all this heat. I've got to keep these kids in school. I've got to keep moving through it. So what do you do? That's where you get into that, what we were talking about is what's the cost benefit? How do you want to play it?
A lot of those remote learning, it ties back to what we were talking about for passwords too, is a lot of those remote learning systems are set up with passwords that are easy for kids to remember, right? Or with passwords that are based on, the kid's first name and then a number, kid's first name in the school year. And look, is it a rich environment for a hack? Probably not, right? If you get into someone's Google Classroom, there's really not a ton you can do except do his homework. And so you don't need the sort of sophisticated username and password and knowledge-based authentication that we probably use for more sophisticated companies. But it's still an issue. When Learn from Home first started, the questions that were coming in to the lawyers here were about, do I have enough of a license to use this product? And if I have a license to use the product, am I setting it up so it respects the children's privacy in a general sense? It wasn't about preparing for hacks, right? Because I think the hack risk is relatively low level. That said, the ransomware is still a big bucket of it because a lot of these, still a big bucket of risk because these schools are insured largely, right? Have the ability to pay ransomware. They probably don't have sophisticated backups. But I tell you, I'm looking forward to hearing what happened in Huntsville because they clearly had an incident response plan. They appear to have had a good immediate communication strategy. They knew what to do and how to do it. Just the idea of getting a school district to make a public statement on something means something's going right on the organizational side of it. That's for sure. But in terms of revisiting, passwords for schools like that, there's no good solution for young children's passwords. I will not reveal what it was my son, who's 9, said to me the other day, but it was his idea for what would be an easy password, what would be easy for him to remember, which is very different from what's an effective password in your username and password login scenario.
Well, and if we want to go down the easy to remember route, I believe it was NIST came out with some new guidance on passwords and using a passphrase. So you can maybe talk to your son about his favorite. I don't know, do the kids listen to watch Scooby-Doo anymore, or what? Pick a Scooby-Doo line. Hey Shaggy, where's the Scooby snack? And that could be his passphrase.
I think we'll have to talk to Pablo Torres about this one. But calling back to an earlier segment we did. I think I am Groot was for a while.
That could be
a very popular password for students of an elementary age. So you got to think it'd be a little more clever and personalize it to yourself. But it's, I think this idea of whatever your password is going to be, just a reminder to folks, who are in the position of advising others, use different passwords. And if you have the ability to tell the customers who work with your company, get the word out to them too that they should not use a password for your site that they use for other sites. If there's anything that they can do that could be destructive once they log into your site, right? Basic stuff.
Yeah.
But it's forgotten a fair amount. And with some of the sophistication and automation of the attacks that are out there, worth reminding folks of.
Yeah, I don't think you can say that enough. Is brilliance in the basics. Use different passwords. Don't use the same one twice. Use different passwords. Don't use the same one twice. I'll say it again. Use different passwords. That said, we're going to take a short break. When we return, Melinda is going to talk to us about her unique journey into cybersecurity leadership, and we're going to have a good discussion about the timeless value of a John Hughes movie. Did weird science inspire her career choice? Spoiler alert, it did not. But maybe Ferris Bueller did. Stick around. We got a great show coming up.
Have an idea for a guest or topic? Send an email to info@nopasswordpodcast.com.
All right, welcome back. Our guest is Melinda Lemke, Head of Information Security at King Spalding, a law firm with 1,200 lawyers in 22 offices globally. Melinda, welcome to No Password Required.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you on the podcast today.
Melinda, we know a little bit about you. Maybe you could just walk us through for our listeners sort of what you do and how you got there.
Sure, happy to. I started out my career in IT. I probably shouldn't admit this, but I sort of fell into IT after college, and just quickly fell in love with it. And spent 20 years at PwC in a number of IT leadership roles. A lot of my career paths were careers that were born out of necessity. So I would happen to be. Well, now I'm dating myself, but during the .com era, for example, when we decided to insource web hosting, I said, I'll do that. Let's talk about it. So I often volunteered for opportunities throughout my career, which led me down a pretty interesting path. I segued into cyber about 5 years ago at PwC, overseeing the largest rollout of CyberArk in the world for privileged access management. I ran the PMO at another Fortune 50 company, and then found my way into King Spalding. So again, first time I've been a big fish in a small pond, but I'm loving it.
So in the past, you've spoken a little bit about mentoring and the passion you have for mentoring that next generation of cyber professionals. Where does that come from for you?
That absolutely comes from the fact that I've had phenomenal mentors, and including the fact I'm working again for one of my mentors that I've known for over 20 years. So never burn a bridge, folks. Never burn a bridge. You never know who you might end up working with or for. So, and that's happened to me a number of times throughout my career. So because of the great mentorship I've had throughout my career and people unselfishly taking me under their wing, it's something that I've aspired to do based on a pay it forward kind of a basis.
What's the best bit of guidance you've received from them?
I think it's sharing their experience and also asking thoughtful questions to help guide toward career paths. So for example, I was at a pivotal point in my career, and my mentor, who again is my boss today, simply said, well, do you like the business side or do you prefer the operations side of IT? And I went, wow, that's a really thought-provoking question. Simple question, right? So I said, well, clearly I prefer business over operations. And that took me down a different path where I went more to the business side into marketing and sales and how IT enables the business. Mm-hmm. So that was a huge pivot in my career from IT service management and operations more into IT enablement and relationship management.
How is it too for mentorship, right? There's that question of, I would like to say that I'm mentoring people, and I would like to say that I have mentors, but I would bet if you ask my mentors, quote unquote, they might not agree that they're mentoring me. Do you think that there should be sort of a formal, like with your mentors, have you said, hey, did it just happen naturally, or was there more of a formal?
Sort of both. So I'm going to refer to my favorite mentee who I'm looking at right now, Mr. Pablo Torres. Thank you for bringing me onto the show. So I had the opportunity to meet Pablo, and we instantly had a connection. But he went out of his way to say, I want to learn more from you. Can we please have coffee? And so he bridged that gap without like coming up and being like, hey, lady, you want to be my mentor? Or me going, you look like a nice fellow and graduated top of your class. Would you like me to mentor you? I think it has to be a bit more organic than that. But it was a bit of both, whereby it was a concerted effort on both parts to say, I want to share some of my knowledge with you, and his wanting to be the recipient of that. And I'll be the first to tell you that I'm getting as much, if not more, out of it as he is. And I frequently joke with him that I'll be working for him someday. So I have no doubt about that.
We all work for Pablo right now. Don't let anybody fool you. Don't let anybody kid you. Yeah, I think, that you mentioned the relationship there between, mentor, mentee, up and down. And I think one thing that is crucially important, certainly in cybersecurity, is this building this community. Whether you want to call it networking or groups of community of interest, whatever, but building this relationships between professionals is so critical in this field, especially. And we'll talk with Pablo a little bit about it later on down. It helps to bring other people into the field because I think oftentimes cyber is viewed as this, stuff that happens in the black box behind the curtain that, only real uber geeks and hooded people can get in. But having, people like yourself take the time to talk to some of the, newcomers into the field, and like you say, pay it forward, right? Because I know one thing that I know is that while you're helping Pablo spends his time reaching out to others that are just getting into the field as well. So it's this cascading effect, I think, is absolutely, it's phenomenal, it's critical, and it's amazing to see all that happen.
You mentioned how you had an IT background and then switched into cyber. I think there's probably a lot of folks with an IT profile who are thinking about where their careers are, and they're thinking about trying to make the move into cyber. Do you have any advice for them, sort of guidance on how they could get up to speed on cyber or test the waters?
Yeah, absolutely. I just, certifications are great. And while some of them require a certain amount of experience within the field itself, you can certainly seek certifications. There is just so much information out there, seeking mentors, taking classes. Just learn as much as you can, because it is a logical pivot. I wouldn't say it's necessarily an easy pivot, but if you have the foundational knowledge, that's more than half the battle, and then the rest is coming up to speed.
I think about the challenges as a lawyer, the challenges that you must have at King Spalding, which is really so large and is not just U.S. based, but has offices out of the country. How does the complexity increase when you go from sort of a U.S. based entity to an international or global entity in terms of privilege access management, hiring? How does that, is it a multiple factor? Like, how do you see the global aspects of what King Spalding does?
Yeah, I think you have to operate by the 80-20 rule in that case. So you have to, it's similar in the privacy space, of course, but you have to come up with baseline rules, standards, policies, make sure that those apply at a global level, and then as regional needs dictate, then you customize those policies and whatnot. So that's really the approach that I attempt to take. And also I dealt with that, attempting to roll CyberArk out to 165 countries. So there's a lot of considerations as you go through projects like that. But I think as long as you can try not to customize the solution for the exception, then you're more than halfway there.
This is curiosity only. Don't answer this if it's too far.
Okay.
But did the lawyers at King Spalding, who know about cyber and privacy, do they bother you? Do they try to interfere with your role, or can you use them when you want to?
They
give you advice?
are my. I actually get starstruck around some of our privacy and cyber attorneys. They've they've been the lead chair on some of the largest breaches in the world. And so I often look at them looking for what can they teach me if in their time. But they're quite accessible. And so we have a nice relationship. And works well.
Well, another question, because it's fascinating. Like, so if client audits, do you have any tips for those who listen to this, who not just law firms, but who are providing information security to any kind of a B2B company that might have audits from their customers or suppliers? So how do you approach that in a general sense?
Yeah, client audits are always tricky, right? My team spends a lot of time reviewing client guidelines and requirements and things like that. I think, as with many things, not just cyber and audit related, but a conversation, right, is often helpful to make sure both sides understand, because we're responding to one right now where they just want, yes, we meet the requirement, and period. And it's sometimes there's a yes but or a yes and type of a scenario, and so those situations tend to be best addressed through conversation and a meeting of the minds to say we do have adequate security controls. However, it may not be this exact line that you've got written down there. So those often can be a negotiation, a conversation, and it's as with I approach everything, it's best to forge a relationship with your auditor and make ssure you're working together with them, not just, oh geez, it's an auditor, I better be careful what I say.
That's a good point.
No, I think that's, you mentioned building the relationships. I think that's one of the things that a critical trait that folks certainly in cyber and to a certain degree in IT tend to shy away from. So is building that relationship building and being able to communicate with people. What are some of the other I would call it intangible traits that you think are important for cyber pros to have in addition to their technical chops?
Yeah, I'm glad you hit on that, because as you pointed out multiple times and repeated yourself, relationship management is so key in IT, and being able to speak the language of the business in IT. I've built my entire career on it, and because they don't often speak the same language. So I think that is very important as a differentiator, particularly if you have leadership aspirations. So I think that's a big one. But as I said, again, don't wait for somebody to come and tap you. Make your own opportunities. Be on the lookout and say, gee, I see a problem over there. Can I take that on? And you're going to open so many doors for yourself. So just don't ever wait to be tapped. Raise your hand if somebody says, hey, do you want to take this on? Again, that's how I fell into the business of web hosting and service management. Somebody said, does somebody want to take on this technical documentation writing project? And I said, I do. I'll do it. I want to go to Tampa, and here I am 20 years later. So raise your hand. Don't wait to be asked for opportunities.
So Melinda, you've had a lot of different roles over the years, seen a lot in IT and security. What advice do you have to our women listeners in particular who are thinking about a career in cybersecurity leadership?
Absolutely. I appreciate that question. I'm so glad that we're finally making strides in that. I was looking at it today because 5 years ago when I entered officially the world of cyber, I think it was about 12% of women in cyber. We're now at 24%. So we've made a lot of good progress, but we have a long way to go. As a woman in IT for over 20 years, I'm very used to being the only woman in the room. It doesn't faze me anymore, but every now and again, I'll look around and go, gosh, there are 50 men on this conference call or in this room. I'm the only woman. And I think it gives you an opportunity to really stand out. And I also think that women bring a very different perspective to cyber. I'm an inherently trusting person in an inherently distrusting profession. But that gives me a unique perspective, and we think about things differently. So, for example, if you talked about attrition at a company I worked for, our attrition rate was 24%. A guy might go, that's okay. We can find another person and we'll just train them up and move on. I go, that's a security problem. That's a security problem. If you have quarter turnover, that's a financial problem. So you're going to resonate with the COO when you talk about that. But if you present that as a security issue, And therefore, you should develop empathy. You should want to retain people. And what are we going to do to put in strategies to make our people want to stay here? I think those are some things that, for example, women can bring to the table. So not that men are not empathetic. I'm not trying to imply that, but we just bring a different perspective to security problems. So please, ladies, keep coming. It's a fascinating and lucrative career.
How can the cybersecurity field, draw more women and just generally more diversity into the field? I mean, what type of things should we be doing?
Not to keep beating the mentoring drum, but women need women supporters and male supporters. And for example, I worked with a great guy who said, I want to be part of your journey. I want to be part of your success story. So I think it's very important for both women and men to mentor and encourage women in the profession. I'm a big fan of STEM and getting women more engaged in it. So
that's I know there's several organizations. Women in Cybersecurity is one of the ones that come to mind. That's a good place for
Witty is great.
Women in Technology, exactly.
Yep.
I think those are great organizations that people should be involved in and support. Just for that alone, it goes back to kind of what I was saying, is building that community and finding organizations that you can find your community and help you to move through it to break in. Because not to put too fine a point on it, there are right now, I want to say, over 500,000 jobs in cybersecurity that are vacant in the United States right now, and it is a national security threat. So we are hemorrhaging intellectual property, money, you name it. And so we need people to jump on the team here to help out this.
Well, thank you, Melinda. After a short break, we return with Ernie's lifestyle polygraph. How will Melinda handle the intense pressure? Stick with us to find out.
You are listening to the No Password Required podcast. We cover cybersecurity and a lot of other stuff.
Welcome back. Today we've already learned a lot about Melinda, but now is when we get to the good stuff. Are you ready for the lifestyle polygraph?
I'm ready. And as we already discussed, I'm trustworthy.
Yes,
so let's go.
Here we go. It's a series of 5 questions that are going to probe some of the inner workings of your mind. In the John Hughes movie universe, who is a better problem solver? Ferris Bueller or Kevin McAllister from the Home Alone movies?
Probably the only time you'll get me to betray Ferris Bueller, because I've seen the movie north of 100 times. But I have to go with Kevin McAllister because his life and his home and his livelihood depended on it. Ferris was just trying to have a good time, right? So, and kudos to him for it. And he was a genius in how he approached it. But Kevin really, there was a lot on the line there, right? An 8-year-old kid trying to hold down the fort while mom and dad are gone. So he really pulled out all the stops to deal with those buffoons. So I got to give it to Kevin on that one.
I mean, to go to another level on that, though, but here's Kevin McAllister, right? The excellent problem solver. How many times does this guy get lost? I mean, what is it, 2-3 years running where so I think from the tactical sense, he's probably a great problem solver, but from the strategic sense, I mean, the guy doesn't even know to follow his parents.
I take the position that only Home Alone 1 is canon, and then Home Alone 2 and certainly not Home Alone 3. You can make an argument Home Alone 2 is canon. But I think really only Home Alone 1, and it was not his fault at that point.
Yeah.
It wasn't even his fault that he got sent up to the hide-a-bed in the attic. I watched this movie on Friday. I watch it always right after Thanksgiving, and then I'm sad because, I've already watched it now, and I have to wait another year to watch it again. And I was contemplating how frequently can you watch that movie. But I've probably seen, maybe not as many, but I've seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off probably 20 times. That's a perfect movie. They're both perfect movies.
Yes.
But Ferris Bueller thinks that if you run the car backwards, you're going to undo the environment.
Well, it's true.
That's his one.
That was not a stroke of genius.
Maybe taking a lark on that.
But he did successfully portray Abe Froman, the Sausage King of Chicago. I mean, I think from a cyber, I mean, if we're talking from a penetration tester, I mean, here's the, that's like a whaling attack right there. Who
Right?
I'm Abe Froman. I'm going to need that table.
You got right.
You the Sausage King of Chicago. Okay.
No challenge response back then.
That's right. Exactly. Number 2. What is more important component of a perfect meal? The location, the food, or the people you share the meal with?
You're going to have to go with the people you share the meal with, unless those people suck, in which case it's going to be the food or the location. Right?
Yeah, well, that
I
makes
mean,
sense.
if you're with
Yeah.
great company, that's
Right.
always going to trump anything.
Yeah.
But if you're with bad company, then wow, when's that pasta dish coming?
Th-
Or
that-
look
or,
at
gee,
the
is it time-
beautiful flowers.
Is it time for
right?
the dessert yet? Really? It's not? Can we just skip to it?
Food eaten outside improves the quality of the food. I think that's generally true, right? And you can have a bad meal. I guess you could have, if you go to the best restaurant with someone who annoys you, the food doesn't taste good.
Doesn't
Right.
matter. Yeah.
I think that's a,
Yeah.
I like that.
The culinary experience is about all three: the ambiance, the food, and the people.
I think you're right. I mean, I talk
It's
about
like a multi-layered defense, right?
You see,
You have to
exactly.
have all three.
exactly. You can, and they all at different times they move in and out of
Right.
importance as you adjust to your circumstance. Yeah, I was often asked, like, hey, when's your best cup of coffee? People say, you're expecting, it's a latte, whatever, blah, 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 with some sort of fruity thing and maybe an umbrella in it. I don't know why you put an umbrella in coffee. But in actuality, the best cup of coffee I ever had was out in the, being the former Marine, was out in the field. We were just coming in, and it was the worst night in the world. I mean, not because of death and destruction, but just it was cold and miserable. We were soaked to the bone. You were tired, and we had coffee, and it was just plain old, U.S. Marine Corps black coffee in a tin cup, and that was just the best.
like
cup
Jimmy Buffett's cheeseburger. in
That's right.
Paradise,
Oh,
right?
it was the best cup of coffee. Oh, but yes. So there you go. It's a combination of all things involved. All right, so here we are. Question number 3. Better use of alone time. We've got 2 scenarios. Hiking and learning something about the world, or kayaking and learning something about yourself.
I'm always going to want to learn about the world over myself. I'm fairly self-aware, but I'm also, as we discussed, very much a world traveler, and so I always want to know more about the world. I once hiked Table Mountain in Cape Town, South Africa, in flip-flops.
Really?
And what I learned from that experience is don't go hiking in flip-flops. But that aside, I didn't really think it was going to be that steep. I thought it was more of a leisurely stroll, and next thing I'm hiking up Table Mountain. So.
Mountain, though.
Well, fact. But,
It's also called a table.
That's most
That's
tables.
true. It sounded flat.
It could go either way. It could go either way.
So always going to err on the side of learning something about the world.
So say kayaking is the sort of thing that looks fun until you're in the kayak, and then you're like, I have to push to go anywhere. It's a lot more work than I think the average non-kayaker would believe kayaking is.
I'm going to agree with you on that one, Jack. That's especially when you start out with the wind, and then you turn around and you go against the wind. Yeah.
You've seen a lot of these kayakers now who go fishing. They have the fishing pole built into the kayak, and at some point it becomes a boat. At some point.
That's an interesting question, and I think we could go
I'm not a
over that for
scientist.
a while.
I'm not a scientist, but at some point, you put enough stuff on it, it ceases to be a kayak.
Yeah.
It to be a boat. So.
Well,
That's why I recommend kayaking down Weeki Wachee, because then you float down and then the bus picks you up.
That's the way.
That's the way to go.
Exactly. Is there a glamping version of kayaking? I don't know what you get. I don't know how that would come together. The glamour kayaking.
This sounds about right.
Yeah.
I think going to Weeki Wachee sounds
Yeah.
about right.
If you haven't been to Weeki Wachee, you should go. It's pretty cool anyway.
It's awesome.
Yeah. A plug for Florida state parks. The springs are really clear. The water is always 72 degrees, and the manatees don't sink your boats. At least not that it's been reported. I think the Tourism Bureau would get after me. All right, number 4. If you were to create a viral video to save or revive a brand, Save or revive a brand. What product would you choose, and what song would you sing to accompany your pitch?
Well,
bear in mind that Tab has just been taken off the market.
Okay, so I think I would go with, I gotta think Folgers is struggling in the era of, custom coffee. So I would probably do Folgers with a little "Wake Me Up Before You Go" Wham throwback.
Nice!
And because
Nice.
I don't you feel like during COVID, you're like, I'm very nostalgic. COVID has made me crave John Hughes movies, Wham, Yacht Rock Radio, so I would.
How has that never happened before? Wham's in the market. They're willing to sell, I think, their license their product.
They've got to be. Yeah, they've got. I mean, they're doing
the get Folgers on the line.
Yeah, I think they're doing the casino circuit now.
This needs to happen.
Yes, I think that's a great idea. The other thing I would also, you mentioned Folgers. What happened to the coffee can? I mean, everybody's doing the coffee in the bags now. The coffee can. I mean, that was a staple of everything. I mean, my dad my dad would store everything in coffee cans. I don't think he ever drank coffee, but, we had coffee cans.
As a Girl Scout, you could make brownies in a coffee can. I don't know. What happened to the coffee can?
What happened
bring back the coffee
Maybe that's what we strive to bring back.
That's right. We can talk to the packaging industry. Occasionally advertises. You'll see boxes. Without it, you couldn't get your e-commerce going. The packaging industry. So they have. We should write a letter to the packaging lobbying groups to see if they can make this happen.
See if we can get any takers.
I have coffee cans probably that are 15 years old that are still holding nails.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Well,
and what's more secure to store your life savings in than a coffee can in the cabinet? I mean, that's for generations of Americans. That was the bank.
Pablo will never know the struggle.
The struggle was real, man.
I thought it was an empty Lucky Charms box. We were supposed to use. Maybe that was the next generation after that.
Well, that's a topic for another day. Is what's with the changing of the Lucky Charms? I mean, there's all kinds of things. I mean, I know they're magically delicious and such, but sticking to a music theme, your positive feelings toward yacht rock are well documented. Based on your passion for the genre, who is the greatest yacht rock band of all time?
Again, a very, very difficult question. I think I'm going to have to go with Air Supply on this. I mean, they're just nail the cheesy ballad. I think the only way you can feel good about Air Supply is if you've just gone through a breakup, in which case you're probably going to want to poke your eye out with a spoon. So don't listen to Air Supply if you've just gone through a breakup. But now, I was already told that I was not allowed to answer Michael McDonald because we're talking about a band versus an artist, but Michael McDonald is clearly the king. Yeah, well, he was part of the Doobie Brothers, of course,
exactly.
But I mean...
Yeah, I mean, I thought he's got to have done some solo work, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, of course he did.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess we could say the Doobies since he was part of that.
Yeah.
But that's a toss-up. It's all good. That's why I listen to it every morning when I get ready to do my cybersecurity job.
Just clean.
Puts me in a calm state of mind.
Well-produced music, solid musicians, clean sounds. I think does Hall & Oates, do they count as yacht rock?
They got to.
Yeah.
They
got to be in there.
Yeah.
There's a show.
You're a rich girl.
Yeah, no.
I mean, come on.
But it's there's a show only accessible now, I think, via YouTube and Daryl Hall's website called Live from Daryl's House. And it went on it was a webcast in like 2009, 2010. Then it was on MTV briefly. And now they occasionally will do special events. But it's basically it's Daryl Hall playing guitar in a gorgeous sort of really big sound space, highlighting a musician like Kenny Loggins would come, right? Like,
how have I not seen this?
Tell
me more.
Yes.
It is tremendous. And if anyone who's listening to this has the power to get this going again, I think the last episode was like in 2017 or so, but Live from Daryl's House. Tremendous. And you get an appreciation for just how good these musicians are.
I'm going to check that out. Daryl Hall is very serious about his sound. I saw him throw a full-on on-stage tantrum at Tropicana when he was performing after a game because of the acoustics. They're just terrible there.
It's that kind of, but that's the kind of professionalism we want from our artists.
Yeah.
Purists.
Yeah, Picasso's not going to paint on a wall, right? He's not a Banksy, right? I want the best canvas there is. But Live from Dale's House, absolutely worth it.
I got to tell you, this is just remarkable. I mean, we covered a lot of ground, and I think I have to, what about Toto? Did they fit into that market? I mean, we're talking about yacht.
How did I not come up with Toto?
I mean,
our supply. Nope.
Really?
It's Toto.
Yeah,
it's Toto.
They got to bless some rains, right?
Oh,
right?
Man, I'm disappointed in myself now. Honestly, Toto is my favorite.
Well, you can throw them back in the in the mix. You put them on heavy rotation tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
I mean, Africa's.
I will bless the rains in Africa.
That's right. As I stopped an old man along the way.
That's a song you can put on for any audience, pretty much any time, and it does exactly what you want it to do. I mean, there's no one who's like, turn this off. Mm-hmm. No, everyone will. You'll get through a crowd, right? There's a handful of songs that are just like that. But absolutely, and they're probably, you would be. I think Toto is probably about 24 songs deeper than you think they are.
Oh yeah,
you probably name a couple songs. Yeah. But if you start playing, it's like the Doobie Brothers. Like it's a handful out. Then you start playing more. You think that's them, and you kind of get surprised about how deep they are. We've got to do some work on that, just to get the word out about people. But Weezer did a fair amount for what they could do by covering Africa. I think there's more that can be done from the general yacht rock. It's still happening now. There's more we can do to get the word out about how good it is.
Well, Melinda, thank you very much for joining us. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about or highlight?
I think we've covered a lot of ground here today. So, I think we've covered it all.
Excellent. Coming up next is Positively Cyber with Pablo Torres. And Pablo Torres is going to share his take on John Wick and his potential as a hyper-aggressive penetration tester. Will this renegade who is trying to leave his checkered past behind be able to work within the law and be part of a team? Let's find out.
There's a place for everyone in the world of cybersecurity, and Pablo Torres plans to prove it. Welcome to Positively Cyber.
All right, welcome back. Pablo, before you jump into Positively Cyber, I heard you did some mentoring recently. Can you tell me a little bit about that, sir?
It was a fascinating experience. It was an opportunity to give back to the community, to give back to a younger generation. And I think that's been the theme throughout this podcast. We've been really geared towards, with this initiative with Cyber Florida, of providing an opportunity, an avenue for children to go ahead and assimilate into technology, to assimilate into cybersecurity. And that experience alone, it was amazing, because how often does a cybersecurity professional in this field get a chance to speak to an 8-year-old and bring down highly complicated technical talk into layman's terms? So simple. I think bridging that gap and making it in a way that is easily digestible by an 8-year-old is going to be a great approach to bringing more people into our camp.
No, you're right. That's one of the we look at it from two aspects. We want kids to get excited about the field, and secondly, it's just we want the kids who grow up today to have cyber just integrated completely into their lives. Understand how they need to know how they're gonna grow up in a world where cyberspace is a place. It is a thing. They have to understand that. Just my personal soapbox is it's that, when I was a kid going through school, you learned about the water cycle. You learned about, how the world works. But nowadays we're not teaching kids how cyberspace works, how the internet works. That's not part of the ingrained curriculum. So I think it's important, and good for you for going out and doing that thing, because you have to, the sooner we can engage kids, the better. The more they can understand, how they can, take care of themselves. Because at the end of the day, don't let the gray hairs fool you. I'm really old, and I'm going to be in the home, and somebody's going to have to look after me. And so it's that 8-year-old kid one day is going to be taking care of me.
Very spot on, Ernie. And I think it's especially important now, given the circumstances that we're living in as a society, to instill some small glimmer of hope within a generation that's growing up within a pandemic. So what can we provide them? Hope, an opportunity, someone to lend an ear. And I feel like that's going to go miles.
And with that said, that is truly positive. And so that segues nicely into Positively Cyber with Pablo Torres. Pablo Torres, go ahead, sir.
Welcome to Positively Cyber. I'm your host, Pablo Torres. On every episode, we are going to venture into the realm of our lion-hearted Hollywood guardians whom triumph over villainy and foes. We are going to decide if they possess the grit and tenacity to contribute as an exceptional cybersecurity professional. If our hunch is right, we will also identify which position would best complement their abilities. Full disclosure, I believe that there is a place for everyone in the cyber field, and this episode's subject may be headed straight to the top of the organization. Without further ado, today we are going to be exploring Keanu Reeves' character John Wick, also known as Baby Yaga, aka the Boogeyman. Mr. Wick is no angel. In the movie, they highlight him to have a reputation as a famed assassin of near mythical repute. It is important that I emphasize that he is not perfect, nor will anyone ever will be, as long as we have the notion of humanistic psychology. His past may be a tad bit sketchy. However, it's not too much of a concern for me. I believe it is never too late to put on a white hat for the overall enhancement of our society and the online mediums that we use to transcend borders. This guy, let me tell you about this guy. This guy is a persistent problem solver that has demonstrated time and time again an uncanny ability to adapt. To say that John Wick is on the introverted side would be like saying he kinda liked this puppy. Seriously, he only said 511 words total in chapter 1. Not surprisingly, the Boogeyman is someone that greatly values his privacy. He definitely has a serious nature, suggesting he is high in conscientiousness, and particularly highly disciplined. He is also likely to be high in orderliness, perhaps leading to be somewhat obsessive-compulsive. I say this because of his affinity for order and symmetry. This obsessive compulsiveness and seeking out of perfection will reflect in his training. This is why he's so effective as an assassin, and more importantly, why he is such a great candidate to be an effective cybersecurity professional. With this being said, his intentions originate from a righteous place, one of protecting the weak and doing right against those who intend to do bad. We cannot forego the reality of John Wick's nature. They do call him the Boogeyman for Pete's sake. He certainly has a shadow side or a dark side. He has a monster within him. However, due to his high sense and morality, the monster is controlled. John Wick is also a nonconformist, not a herd member. He does not want what most people do. He is not motivated by the need for status or impulsive pleasures like the majority. His strong, introverted, private side causes him to seek and appreciate the simple things in life. He tends to lead more with his head rather than his heart. This makes him a more no-nonsense, straight-talking type of person. It's these strengths that allow him to work well with others and build strong relationships with those who have earned his trust. It also makes him a more honest person. He will speak the truth rather than trying to spare someone's feelings. This doesn't mean he is without compassion. It just means a priority for the truth or facts over feelings. John Wick would definitely be a sensation type or sensor according to Myers-Briggs type indicator. His survival is seen to be very dependent on being observant, paying attention to details and reality, which leads me to believe that he would be a perfectly suited candidate for the role of penetration testing. Our hero of the day may not be a perfect fit for some of the more volume-driven technical jobs within the industry. However, while we are at it, let's be frank. Cybersecurity at its core is an ever-evolving battlefield. His quick, decisive action and improvisation skills favor him. In high-pressure and volatile scenarios such as identifying a publicly exposed server that presents a vulnerability vector for attack from a nefarious rogue actor, John Wick is a good man with a solid set of priorities. He is loyal to his morals and will risk everything to defend what is right. Because of his tenacity and never quit attitude, I am totally comfortable placing the Boogeyman near the very top of my fictitious organization. Mr. Wick, welcome aboard. You are my Senior Director of Information Security within the Security Operations and Red Team Penetration Testing Team, sir. And we are looking forward to following your leadership, as you are a man of few words. Therefore, when you speak, we will listen.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Pablo Torres.
You know, I think in the John Wick universe, the most fascinating thing is the hotel concept, right? The place where he could show up. You could have a token, essentially, or you could, I don't remember if the token was what got him in. I think they knew who he was, and he could stay there and be safe, right? I think that was how it worked. Sort of like but while you were there, you couldn't do any harm, like a zero trust environment or something like that, maybe, where this is the area where there's going to be no fighting. I mean, that's I like that as a cybersecurity concept, I think, the hotel. Some this is an environment where we kind of know, but the harm that folks can do is limited. And when harm breaches it, it's like a really big deal.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, it's that self-policing mechanism in there. You know, everybody, I think, so you have the technical controls in place, but also you also have the agreement of the users that agreed that agreed to participate in that framework. That that they know that, okay, yes, while I'm in here, I will be safe, and I will not attack because on the other side of it, no one's going to attack me. It becomes that safe space because they have the technical controls. You have your token to get in, but you also have the policy controls in place that you have to abide by to operate in said safe space.
And there's the tickets too, right? Like when they call the hit, they write the ticket or whatever it is. You have to accept it. So it is sort of like at least like a red teaming, right? You have an assignment, you have parameters, can't go beyond it. There's a lot of good cyber stuff. I don't think he uses a computer in the movie. I don't remember if he does in 1 or 2. I don't think he does. It's like this sort of analog world. There might be some cell phone usage. Is it maybe?
Yeah, no, definitely cell phone usage. As far as computers, I mean, I would say he's using a supercomputer, and that's his mind. That's a very powerful machine. It's almost like a quantum computer. You're not processing binary and ones and zeros. He's processing both, which would be the in-between, the gray. Very good comparison, guys. I think you guys nailed it on the head. And it's almost like within that hotel, we have a structure, an infrastructure that has been built on top of rules, policies, and procedures. And then we have run books and sessions that we can tabletop to go ahead and develop a strategy to be more effective as let's say, an amicable assassin within a hotel that is meant for something that's not nice.
I would say I have one hesitation on him, though, is that he's not solely motivated by money. And that makes it a little challenging, right? Because I always wonder if something else that he believes in more could compromise him. So I'd be a little worried about that. So we want to monitor him and have his colleagues keep an eye on his network activity a little bit. I think his pros outweigh his cons, but you got to worry about him. It's not stock options that are going to keep him in his seat. He's got to believe in the mission.
Yeah, you got to appeal to. He's the guy you have to appeal to the ideological motivation behind it, or you could do a little love of family approach. If we count the dog as
exactly. As you would say, the mission always comes first.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of the program. Thank you for joining us. First and foremost, I have to thank my co-hosts, Jack Clabby and Pablo Torres. And also, thank you to our guest, Melinda Lemke. And listen, I got to say, you've elevated the level of this podcast just by highlighting that Toto should be, gets greater recognition. And that said, we are going to try to bless some rains down in Africa. Take that time to do the things we never had. That said, remember to rate, review, and subscribe to No Password Required Podcast, and send your questions or comments to info@nopasswordpodcast.com. I'm Ernie Ferresso, and thank you for listening. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you for listening to the No Password Required podcast. The show is produced by Cyber Florida. A special thanks goes out to our friends at Carlton Fields and Cognizant. If you'd like to learn more about the podcast, visit our website, cyberflorida.org/pod.